My message to corporate Canada is that when I'm Prime Minister, if you want any of your policy agenda pushed forward, you're going to have to convince not just me, but the people of Canada that it is good for them.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. Today, Pierre delivered a keynote address at an event hosted by the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade. He then sat down with Board of Trade President Bridget Anderson to answer some questions.
Let's take a look.
I want to thank the Board of Trade for the long-standing 18-month invitation that they have had for me to come here today. And I don't want you to feel bad about the time it took, because this is the first time I have spoken to either a Chamber of Commerce or a Board of Trade since I became leader of the Common Sense Conservatives 2 years ago. During that time, I've spoken at 110 shop floors and 5 union local facilities. And the reason why this is only my first Chamber or Board of Trade is nothing to do with my view on business. I love business. I love free enterprise. I love the people who risk their entire worth their entire family savings in order to start a business and build their dreams. Rather, the reason this is my first time speaking to a business association of this type is because my experience with the corporate lobbyists in Ottawa, the main groups there, have been that they have been utterly useless in advancing any common sense interests for the people on the ground.
Isn't that interesting? How do you think the lobbyists and the corporations feel about that?
Sounds like he's making enemies all over. But, I think it's kind of a smart move. From what I can tell, he's not disparaging the Board of Trade where he's currently speaking, but he's disparaging the lobbyists.
Well, and he also said something important, and I'm not sure if he intended everyone to catch on to it or not, but he said this is the first time I've spoken to a business association in for 2 years, and the reason is because there was quote unquote more. I'm not going to say more important, but I guess I will say more important people to speak to. That's why he's been speaking to, the people that, work on the shop floors, the average Canadian that works across the country, not with the big business, associations and stuff like that, because he wants to make sure that he's hearing what the average common sense Canadian has to say. And and I'm guessing he's saying, it's been my experience that the corporate lobbyist has been so useless, and that's kind of had him shy away from this, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I think maybe he is saying to just average Canadians like us, I'd rather talk directly to you guys, and I don't want to hear anything that the lobbyists have to say. I don't care about the lobbyists. I care about Canadians, not what corporate interests want.
It's also a smart move to come out with this perspective, because what has he really been hearing from Trudeau and the Liberals in the House of Commons? You have Jenny Byrne, who is a lobbyist for the for Loblaws and all of this crap. So,
and they also say that the Conservatives are just for big business. They're not there for everyday Canadians, and he is dispelling that with this statement.
Yeah, he's trying to say, you can try and make an argument for past governments, but that's not going to be my government. That's what he's coming out and swinging. So it's a good start, and it's a good way to present himself at the Board of Trade in Vancouver.
Corporate lobbyists in Ottawa are focused on getting lunches with ministers at the Rideau Club, or showing off their latest ESG brochure, or expecting that politicians are going to do things for them without actually convincing the people on the ground of the benefit to them. My common sense plan to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime is a bottom-up free enterprise agenda, not a top-down state capitalism agenda. It is not about politicians and CEOs working together for their own interests. It is about unleashing the power of free enterprise so that workers and entrepreneurs and consumers can exchange the voluntary purchase of goods for services, goods for dollars, of investment for interest, and of work for wages. It is about putting people back in charge of their lives. And my message to corporate Canada is that when I'm Prime Minister, if you want any of your policy agenda pushed forward, you're going to have to convince not just me, but the people of Canada that it is good for them. For too long, corporate leaders have thought that their role is simply to write a policy statement and expect it to be implemented. Meanwhile, it has been left to workers on the ground and First Nations in their communities to fight for the projects that have been good for them, projects that are ultimately blocked by government gatekeepers and leaving those workers and those communities on the sidelines. And so when I'm Prime Minister, my obsession, my daily obsession, will be about what is good for the working class people of this country.
So very, very good opening, I must say. He's hitting the right chords here, and he's really trying to dispel that age-old myth that conservatives are in the pockets of the corporations, like Fox said. So I think it's a really, really good approach. And the funny thing is Trudeau will turn around and say, well, he's just, copying the MAGA politics. Okay. So what, you're saying it's a bad thing? Are you seriously trying to argue with Pierre that policy should not be dictated by corporations unless it actually has a net positive effect for the people of Canada? Is that what you're saying?
Well, this is the thing that's so ridiculous about Trudeau talking about, oh, MAGA politics is bad. Okay, MAGA politics, make America great again. Translate that to make Canada great again. So you don't want Canada to be great? It's just so ridiculous.
Well, he's trying to say that MAGA politics, make America great again politics, is somehow far right. And it's not. Well,
the problem with the Liberals is they've gone so far left that anybody to the right of them, whether you're left wing, right in the center, or right wing, is far right. And I mean, the Conservatives right now, they're the centrist party. They're just to the right of center.
And the thing is it's become almost an insult to hurl at somebody, to say, oh, you're right wing. So that's not an insult. The people that, are the problem are the extreme far right people.
And the extreme far left. Anything extreme in anything, not just
right.
Politics, can be a bad thing.
So, the Canadians that are supporting the Conservatives, vast majority of us are leaning right, and we're common sense people. And some of us lean a little bit to the left as well. But according to the Liberals, we're far right. And this is the funny thing. This is where Trudeau says, Pierre's the one trying to divide people. You're the one that is basically saying anybody that supports Pierre is far right. You're using the only tactic that the left knows how to do, which is shame people.
Well, they also know how to divide people.
Right.
So they're trying that too.
Well, and that's what I mean. If you're not with us, you're against us. That's what Trudeau's approach here is. And it's not going to work this time, because people have seen the results of Trudeau and his policies.
Canadians are tired. We want to be happy and united and prosperous. And that's what Pierre Poilievre is going to get us.
So let's jump to about 45 minutes in, when he sits down with the Board of Trade president.
And I want to start with affordability and start with our standard of living. We have a lower income per person than we did before the pandemic. We have talked a lot in this room at the Board of Trade about affordability challenges, not just for individuals, but particularly for small businesses and some medium businesses as well. You spoke a lot about cutting costs and about government getting out of the way, which is a welcome message for many in this room. But can you talk more about how you're going to turn around the challenges we see on economic growth? There seems to be That piece of the puzzle has been missing in the narrative federally and provincially for some time. When we talk about what is government's economic growth vision, what would you say to that?
The government has to get out of the way for entrepreneurs and workers to grow the economy. We have a gatekeeper economy today, where we have the second slowest permits in the OECD. That means that capital has to sit on the sidelines for years while it waits to get a maybe out of the regulators. In many cases, this just means that capital doesn't sit on the sidelines, it leaves. We have 800 billion more Canadian dollars invested abroad than the world invests in Canada. So what's happening, there's this debate now about whether Canadian pension funds should be encouraged to invest more in Canada. Well, the question is, why aren't they doing it without government encouragement? The answer is because the governments have made this an uninvestable country where you can't get anything done. Whether it's like a small business that's trying to get a permit to expand by an extra 1,000 square feet, or a pipeline, or a mine, or a housing development, this is a nation in waiting. So we need to release those incredible productive energies. We should set a goal, and I'm going to be bringing together the provinces and the municipalities to set this goal. Let's make this the fastest place in the OECD to get a building permit at all three levels of government.
Wouldn't that be something? We are the second slowest, and we would end up being the fastest. Wouldn't that be something? And it's not speed just for the sake of it, sacrificing safety and everything like that. There are many, 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 many different reasons that Canada is so slow, and very little of it has to actually do with safety. It's just bureaucracy upon bureaucracy. Like where we live, it took us, what was it, 8 months? No, over a year to get a permit for a fence. Something's wrong there. Something is seriously wrong there. So, this is important. What he's saying is that nobody wants to invest in Canada. And we've seen this for the federal government. They've actually had to go out and, quote unquote, bribe corporations, pay them $16 billion to get them to come in and quote unquote, invest in Canada.
Yeah, and then they went and hired foreign workers, temporary foreign workers, and are planning on bringing them into Canada instead of creating Canadian jobs. Speaking of Canadian jobs, and Bridget kind of touched on this at the beginning, she said, wages are down. And I believe the reason for that is that there are so many more people in this country than there are jobs.
Yeah, supply and demand. Exactly.
StatsCan just released their unemployment numbers for the past month, which was February of 2024. And the economy added 41,000 jobs in February, but the unemployment rate went up to 5.8%. How is that possible? And the answer, at least a good chunk of the answer, has to do with how many people are coming into Canada. They're bringing in more people into this country than there are jobs available for those people.
Right, and the other reason is because you're actually having people who have since retired re-entering the workforce because they don't have a choice.
That's right.
So you are bringing in people from across the world to Canada in order to... I'm not even sure what the reason is, but the effect that is having on the economy is you are vastly increasing the supply of workers, which means it's a field day for the companies that are looking for this specific type of worker to hire. Now, the other problem that is going on in Canada is that there are not enough specialist people out there to actually fill the specialist jobs. Why? Because they're all leaving. So we have this double-edged sword or triple-edged sword where we have the actual specialists. They're the ones that are leaving the country, like your doctors and your engineers and your scientists and all of them. So they're all leaving. And then you're bringing in too many people. And you also have the senior citizens that should be retired, and they can't afford to just stay retired, so they have to come back in the workforce.
And then you also have people, and I've said this before, I see it on my Facebook groups, where you have moms who are, you know, maybe they're home on mat leave and have to start picking up something on the side, or maybe they already have a full-time job and have to pick up a little job after the kids are home in bed. I mean, that's kind of what happened to us.
Right. We, you know, and thousands and thousands of families across this country are in the same boat. So this is what it is.
And Trudeau and the Liberals have created these economic conditions.
That would unleash production right across this country. We have probably the biggest supply of natural resources per capita of any country on earth, and yet we can't produce those resources. So I will unleash that production, all forms of energy. The solution for our environment is abundant, affordable energy, not expensive and exclusive energy as our current government. You know this guy, this environment minister we have, he's incredible. He's against nuclear. He's obviously against oil and gas. He's against forestry. He wants to shut down Quebec's forestry sector because he says it's the only way to save 5,000 caribou. You know, and he's against roads. We saw that as well. So I don't know what kind of mud huts he would have us living in, but this is the guy who is in charge of the environment for Justin Trudeau. We need to get rid of him and put in place a common sense minister who understands that our resources are a benefit to the world, not a hindrance to the environment. And then we need to cut taxes. The carbon tax is a massive disadvantage to our industrial sectors that drives production, ironically, to more polluting jurisdictions. By axing the tax, we will lower the cost of production and bring home more of that production to our Canadian economy.
He's on point about Mr. Gibault.
Yeah, he's not wrong.
Captain Dumpster Fire himself. He is so radical that nothing that he wants to do even makes sense. Like, it is an oxymoron to say that you're an environmentalist, but you're against nuclear. It doesn't make sense. Nuclear is literally the highest producing form of green energy on planet Earth.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, our environmental policies really show what an ideologue that Gibault is, but also that Trudeau is. Because with everything in life, there's a cost-benefit analysis. For example, let's take nuclear. Nuclear produces clean energy, and it can power a lot of homes and do so no matter what the weather is. It doesn't have to be windy, doesn't have to be sunny. It's a good method of energy production. In fact, it's the best that we have. However, is it possible that there could be issues caused by the nuclear material? Yes, of course, there's always a possibility. However, Canada is the best in the world at mitigating these possibilities, and in 60 years, we've never had an incident. So you have to you have to weigh the pros and cons. The pros for nuclear are very, very high. The cons are present, they're there, but we mitigate them so well that they're almost irrelevant.
Vancouver is a port city, and we have a lot of folks in the room who work at waterfront businesses, who work at the port, who are from the labor community. And we also have a lot of folks in the room who are exporters. So can you talk a little bit about your view on expanding trade? It comes at a time where you were talking about investment, but expanding trade when we have really had some difficulties around our supply chains over the recent years, floods and fires, labor disruptions, disruption at the port. So maybe speak a little bit about expanding trade and how that could benefit some of the small and medium businesses in the room especially.
Well, we obviously have the great Ed Fast here. He was our former trade minister and concluded some of our best trade agreements. And he could answer this better than I could. But we need to make, look, I think at this point, our biggest challenge is no longer just adding new agreements. We have a lot of agreements. We have the CPTPP with most of the Pacific countries. We have Canada, EU. We have obviously unfortunately diminished trade agreement with the states, which I will improve when I'm Prime Minister. But what we need is, one, to improve the agreements we have, and two, to make our country an enterprise zone. So let's focus on the first. My priorities in the U.S. with the U.S. is to get rid of the softwood lumber tariffs. It's insane that we're still paying these tariffs. Harper resolved the softwood lumber dispute in 100 days of becoming Prime Minister. He got $4 billion of U.S. collected tariffs reimbursed to Canada, and all of the tariffs eliminated. He did that in 100 days. Trudeau's had 3 presidents in 8 years, and he hasn't solved the new softwood lumber tariffs. 2, we need an end to Buy America, which blocks Canadian businesses from doing subnational work in the U.S. In fact, it's even worse than that. Biden is trying to push a Buy America policy on federal procurement, something that was never in the original Buy America. Harper got us an exemption under Obama to Buy America. We need a full exemption to Buy America. We are an ally of the U.S. They should be, we should have reciprocal free trade on construction projects. And third, we need guarantees that our metals are not going to be subject to future tariffs by our biggest trading partner. And I will be focused on that. I will not be focused on woke virtue signaling and other grandstanding like the Trudeau government did, which is one of the reasons why we got such a terrible deal under USMCA. And finally, we need to make this into an enterprise zone. We need to make this the best place on earth in which to produce, export products. Right now, it's too expensive, and therefore, even if you have a free trade agreement with other countries around the world, we can't beat their costs, because the biggest cost here is government. And by the way, it's not about reducing wages. We're not losing to low-wage countries anymore. We're losing to high-wage countries. Ireland, Switzerland, Australia, Singapore. They're eating our lunch. They have high wages. We need a high-wage economy with a low-cost government.
It was interesting. I was watching Bridget's body language when she was talking about when Pierre was talking about this, and she got this little smile when he was talking about that we need to produce more here, and we need to get government out of the way. So obviously that struck a chord with her, being the president of the Board of Trade out in Vancouver, because she's seeing that as well. This is the problem with Justin Trudeau. He is taxing the ever-loving crap out of every single sector in this country. And why is he doing that? Because he needs to fund all of these woke programs and quote-unquote progressive programs. Freeland likes to call it investing in Canadians. No. What you're doing is you are making life so expensive for the independent Canadian that they are forced to rely on your government and essentially chain them financially to your policies. So they can't get out.
And Pierre touched on another item there, is that we don't manufacture enough in this country anymore. I mean, think of all the stuff that you buy on a day-to-day basis. Almost none of it's made here in Canada. So a lot of it is made in China, for example, which means that your money, your Canadian money, when you purchase these items, is going to China to pay somebody in China to manufacture these items. Why don't we keep more of our Canadian money here in Canada?
Well, and some people will say there's lots of reasons, but just think about food, right? Think about the food that comes in from Mexico or Chile or even the United States. They have to ship things, like especially the fresh goods, really early. So it's not even ripe when they're shipping it, because there's the journey to get here. And there's the other foods that, they have to put in all of these preservatives in order to give them a proper shelf life and transport life, so they, again, survive the trip up to Canada that you wouldn't otherwise have. And Fox makes a very good point. Why are we letting all of this money the Canadians spend leave the country? What happened to Made in Canada?
It's gone.
And Trudeau and Freeland are bragging about, companies investing in Canada? No, absolutely not. But we need to get back to Made in Canada. We need to get back to, buying a product and actually having some confidence it's going to last more than a week. It was really, really sad when, BlackBerry, now BlackBerry's still kind of around, but BlackBerry was a source of pride, in the Canadian tech sector, because they were one of the world leaders in smartphones. Now, they made some poor business decisions, but, we need more of those countries. We need more of those entrepreneurs. And to Pierre's point, we're not going to get them if Trudeau makes it impossible to actually start up a business and operate it here. That's why all of these businesses, they send their production overseas. Why? Because it's cheaper.
Yeah. Do you guys remember the brand Roots? Their entire brand was based around being Canadian, and now they manufacture overseas.
So
That's
much
just
for that
one
brand.
Example.
So much for that brand, right?
You spoke in great detail about housing, and we know in Vancouver it is a long, long challenge for us that really hampers our ability to attract and retain talent. And you spoke about cutting costs and government getting out of the way and speeding up permitting and linking federal dollars to municipalities to targets. Are there other considerations that would be on the table, whether it would be interest-free mortgages like the US does, or cutting taxes elsewhere within the system to really start to unlock some of the value and to change the crisis that we're in?
What do you mean? What kind of tax policies?
Looking at any kind of the taxes that are built into the housing system right now, like what else could be on the table to really see some meaningful change quickly?
I'm open to the idea of cutting more taxes on home building, and we're looking at different options on that. We supported taking the GST, HST off of rental construction. We obviously are going to get rid of the carbon tax, which raises the cost of transporting materials, but also, for example, drywall has natural gas ingredients in it. It becomes more expensive with the carbon tax. By axing the tax, we'll bring homes that people can afford. But the biggest tax of all is the massive delays in getting permits for construction. And this is where I put the challenge over to the business community. The home builders tell us, what I just said, the home builders have been saying for years. My question to the home builders is, what have you done to defeat gatekeeping local politicians in elections? Where is your coalition to defeat these politicians, these mayors and councillors who stand in the way of home building?
I think this is really interesting, the fact that Pierre's saying, yeah, I've talked to the home builders. What have you done?
Well, and I don't think he's calling them out. It sounds to me like he's trying to...
It's a call to action.
Yeah, I was going to say a call to action. He's trying to create a call to action. What have you done? Let's do it together. Let's figure it out.
Yeah, like if you need to set something up in order to get the right politicians in to get this bureaucracy out of the way. You have all of these people in all these offices. What are you paid to do if you're not getting these permits done? It doesn't make sense. And budgets are not being spent properly. We see this at virtually all levels of government, and it needs to stop. So we need to get the right people in. And this is where people, they really need to understand. And hey, Fox and I are guilty of this as well, or we have been in the past. We're certainly not now. But people really need to understand who they're voting for. People need to sit down, when you're electing a councillor, whether you're electing a mayor, and not just check a box because he's familiar or she's familiar.
Or because you've always voted for that party. I mean, it would be interesting to me if we took the party names completely off the ballots and just...
Can you imagine if we did that?
Yeah, and put the policies instead. How many of us would still vote the way we vote?
Right? That would be interesting. But people spend more time selecting a cell phone than they do selecting a person to vote for in an election. So we as Canadians across the country, we all have work to do there. Every party, every voter. The great thing is from what we've seen since we started this channel, that is changing. Canadians are paying a lot more attention. And they're going to be some seriously informed voters come the next federal election. But that has to go at your municipal level as well. It has to go at the provincial level. Canadians need to know exactly what they're going to get when they vote for somebody.
Because if you don't do that, it's not going to change. You can write another essay or commission another paper by the C.D. Howe Institute, but if these politicians keep getting elected to block home building, then they'll keep blocking home building. So that's what I mean when I say the business community actually has to step up, because the only way we're going to make homes affordable for people is to get the gatekeeping out of the way at all three levels of government. And it's time that the home building companies actually play a leadership role in the politics of driving that change.
I could keep you on the stage for a very long time with lots more questions, but I do know you have other places to be. So if I could ask one last question to wrap up our conversation. We recently lost Canada's 18th Prime Minister, Brian Mulroney. Friends and foe alike gave quite the tributes to him. I really reflected a lot about what Jean Chrétien said and talked about how they took themselves seriously, their work not so much. And it really was a different time in politics. He was a consequential leader, Mr. Mulroney, and many would say quite an incredible statesman. When you reflect on his legacy, what comes to mind? And then when you think about what you're going into now in maybe October of 2025, what kind of leadership do we need today, and how could you bring the country together?
Well, first of all, I reiterate my love and support for the Mulroney family. Mark Mulroney, his son, is one of my best friends, and I was very saddened when he called me with the news that his father had passed. And I'm also very grateful for the mentorship Brian and Mila have provided Anna and I on his political legacy. A couple of things. One, though his agenda was very controversial at the time, very controversial. You mentioned that everyone praises him now. Well, at the time, he would tell you that that wasn't the case. He had to take on a lot of entrenched interest in order to achieve frankly, the revolution that he brought at the time. Privatizing Air Canada and numerous other crown corporations that had been very entrenched. Reducing the cost of government. He brought in among the slowest spending growth of any government in history. He balanced the operational budget. We had an ongoing deficit because of the interest on the preceding Trudeau government's debt. He obviously opened up Canada to free trade with the United States. He brought in the inflation target. Up until then, the Bank of Canada had no mandate of any clear purpose, so they just kept printing money and leading to double-digit inflation. He brought in a 2% inflation target. And internationally, he was firmly on the side of freedom against Soviet communism, which was a change from the previous government. And he was on the side of freedom in South Africa against apartheid, which was a lonely position for him to take in the Western world at the time, but obviously he has been proven right. So the lesson I take from that is that he was prepared to stand alone in order to stand for what was right. And that it wasn't easy in the short run, but in the long run, he has been vindicated. And finally, the fact that everyone has heaped so much praise on him in the last days since his passing is proof of the common sense consensus that he helped forge. The aforementioned policies that I just listed, though they were controversial in 1984, they became almost a unanimous consensus thereafter. Balanced budgets, free enterprise, privatization, support for our resource sector, all of those things were widely supported by all three of the major political parties up until 2015. And what I'm hoping to do is bring back the common sense consensus that we had among Liberals, NDP, and Conservatives for those values that made our country so prosperous, so safe, and such a wonderful place to be up until 2015. That is what we're going to restore, and that is what we're going to bring home. Thank you.
So the most important thing that I took from that last question was when Pierre said what he really learned from Mulroney was that he was willing to stand alone to do what he thought was right. And that's what, like them or hate them, agree with them or disagree them, that's what a strong politician is supposed to do. Now, a lot of people don't like what Brian Mulroney did. a lot of people didn't at the time and like it now. Doesn't really matter. You know, when a former prime minister passes, you know, there is a certain, pardon the term, because Fergus likes to say this all the time, there's a certain level of decorum that needs to be exercised. You know, they did serve the country. They're part of this country's history. And, you know, we don't erase them like the left likes to do with people that they don't like. You know, there's going to be a bunch of policies that Mulroney did that people don't like. But some of them were good. And some of them were not good, but they were necessary because of Pierre Trudeau destroying this country.
Well, I was just going to say, do you think that Pierre Poilievre is going to be like Brian Mulroney in a way that he's going to inherit this country that's just, it's been hopelessly mismanaged, and he's going to have to pick up the pieces and try to like form it back together and create this cohesion, not just among the country, like with the finances, but among the people.
That's the thing. He has a lot of work to do.
He's got a huge mess to clean up.
And it's going to be bumpy, folks. Like, this is what everybody, I think, needs to understand. Everyone is hoping that Pierre can come in and fix this country. And he can. With what he's laid out, he can. But it's going to be bumpy.
And it's going to take time.
And there are going to be some decisions he's going to have to make that are going to be unpopular. We just don't know what they are yet. But they're going to be unpopular. Why? Because they're necessary.
If you hear what he said right at the end, though, it was about uniting people who, it doesn't matter if you've previously voted Conservative or NDP or Liberal. It's about bringing us all together as Canadians to fix this.
When you're dealing with something that is as catastrophic as the damage that's been happening to Canada, there's going to be controversial decisions that are going to need to be made, because it's never just an easy road to fix everything. But you know, the one thing that we are confident in is that on that road, he's going to invest in roads. Number one. So check mark on that. But we don't feel that he's going to be sitting there dividing Canadians and demonizing one group or the other. His goal is to get the heck out of the way of Canadian success. That's the number one thing that he's going to try to do. It's going to take time to get all of these laws out of the way in order to do that.
But it'll be done quicker just because the Conservatives are projected to get a majority.
Right. And the more of a majority they get, the faster that this stuff goes through. So it's going to be a bumpy road, but it's a road that we will traverse, and we will end up at that destination sooner or later. We have to stick with the plan. And I think the best thing that the Conservatives can do is be transparent, be open about it, Pierre and the Conservatives. That way, there's going to be no surprises. And if things don't go the way you expect, just be transparent about it. Canadians desire honesty and truth above all else after this 8 years of Justin Trudeau. And if you make a mistake, own it, please. Just own it. You will gain much more respect and demonstrate much more integrity than Trudeau and the Liberal government ever did. Because they just try to cover everything up. You say, yep, this is the mistake. We're holding people accountable. We're moving on. So that was Pierre's visit. His speech was actually 40 minutes long before that, so we didn't want to get into it all, but we will drop the link. So if you want to watch the entire thing, you certainly can do that. But this was a really positive event, I think, that he was at, and we heard some new things from Pierre, which is always good to hear. His policy is crystallizing a little bit more each day, and we think the future is looking very bright for Canada. We just need that election.